Historically, midterm election voter turnout is low. We all know that, but it's especially low among young voters. In the 2018 midterms, 28.2% of Americans under 30 voted, but in 2014 and 2010, that turnout was significantly lower, and the Democratic Party faced devastating defeats across the country. Now, over the past 2 years, Biden's approval rating from the under 30 crowd has hit depths no Democratic president has plumbed in decades, fueled by record student loan debt, high inflation, and what they see as broken campaign promises. Now, with democracy on the ticket, every vote counts. So what brings the youth out to the polls? What will get them there? Joining me now is Victor Shi, co-host of iGen Politics podcast and one of the youngest elected delegates for Joe Biden in 2020. Hey, Victor, what's up? Welcome, man.
Hi, so nice to be with you, Michael.
Excellent. I'm really glad to have you on. I love this space and this conversation. You recently wrote a piece for the Boston Globe, and you say Democrats can succeed in getting my peers to the polls if they do two things. First, they must clearly present the contrast between what Democrats and Republicans have accomplished and what each party stands for. And second, they must utilize new social media platforms. Tell me a little bit more about that and where you think this is going right now.
Definitely. So here's the bottom line. There's no path for victory in November without the votes from young people for Democrats. And I think there's good and bad news for Democrats in large part. The bad news is that there's an increasing number of young people who express disapproval of how President Biden and Democrats are performing compared to a year ago. And you showed up on that graphic a little while back. But the good news is that there are under 6 months between now and November. And young people seem energized and ready to turn out in similar rates to that of 2018, which helped Democrats win. So I think in the remaining months between now and November, I really see two things, as I mentioned in the Boston Globe piece, that Democrats need to do in order to mobilize my peers. The first is, I think, presenting in clear contrast the difference between the Republican and Democratic parties. I think that's the easy part. Republicans are clearly targeting people like me, people who are in classrooms, they're banning books, they're targeting LGBTQ expression, they're making the lives of young people harder, and Democrats aren't. And I think second, Democrats really need to utilize social media platforms. We saw this in Georgia in 2020 with then candidates Jon Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock utilizing new social media platforms. So ultimately, I think it's about doing the hard work and needing to show young people that we matter if they want to earn our vote.
So, Victor, I mean, the social media platforms and all that's good. I appreciate it's all good and well. But Democrats have always had a messaging problem. It's one of the things that, quite honestly, I took advantage of back in 2010. And we see the opportunity for that again in this cycle. Biden and the Democrats have had success in getting infrastructure done. They've, had efforts like Build Back Better, climate change, student debt, and voting rights are now facing hard roadblocks. How do Democrats convince younger voters that they are a priority in their agenda when young voters don't feel that they are?
It's so challenging. And as you very well know, Michael, 6 months between now and November is an eternity in politics, and a lot can change. While I don't think Democrats are in the best position to win right now, I do think there's a lot of time to reverse course. And I agree with you that communication and messaging is going to be key, especially for me and my peers to turn out and vote. I think Democrats often have a tendency to go on the high road side of the debate, the classic Michelle Obama saying, when they go low, we go high. But I think now is the time for Democrats to present in clear terms as possible for young voters the difference between Republicans and Democrats. So, for instance, Democrats aren't trying to ban books. They aren't trying to limit civil rights. It's the Republican Party that's doing that. But I think being more aggressive is one strategy the Democrats should take. But I think young people really need to understand the difference between both parties, and they need to invest in young voters. And they need to meet us where we are. They need to come to college campuses. They need to show us that we matter. And I think a lot of that has to do with showing us that we matter and we are included in the conversation. We don't like being talked at. I think we like to be included in the conversation. So I think that's going to be key in terms of showing young voters that we can trust the Democratic Party and vote for their candidates.
So, Victor, here's the rub for me. Are young people checking out because the change that they were promised hasn't come to fruition? And who said it was going to happen just because you voted? Because the voting is just the first part of it. Accountability, staying on top of the issues, pressing the point is a big piece of this as well. So how do you see that dynamic right now?
Right. So I'm so glad you asked this question, Michael, because I don't actually think that me and my peers are necessarily checking out from politics. I think it's actually the opposite. So polls show that we're expected to turn out in 2022 at the same rate that we did in 2018, which was a year that saw historic turnout from young people and in turn helped Democrats win. We continue seeing young people energetic and ready to fight for key issues. And a lot of me and my peers are running for state and local offices. But what I think is different compared to 2018 and even 2020, for that matter, is that more of people my age don't seem to believe in the traditional process of government and in elected officials anymore. There was a Harvard Youth poll that came out a couple of weeks ago that showed nearly 60% of young people don't believe that politics can solve the issues facing young people anymore. And I think that's unsurprising given the many challenges that face our lives, from gun violence to climate change to the cost of education. All of those don't seem to be improving. So, I don't think it's realistic for young people to expect that everything will be better in our lives by electing better elected officials, but I do think that we expect those who hold power to listen to our voices and include us in the decision-making process and really use the legislative or executive tools available to turn out my peers. That's something I think Democrats need to do between now and November, and I think could make a huge difference in getting my generation to vote for them.
Well, I can't believe I'm about to quote Barack Obama, but he was right. We are the change we seek, and that is elemental, I think, to a lot of young voters out there. Victor Shi, thank you so much, my friend, for coming on. I really appreciate you, man.